Check, check, check. How y'all doing? Oh my God, it's so lit in here. My name is Tarun. A lot of people call me T. I'm in a couple of bands. I run a record label. I've toured in Asia extensively, and I've done record deals and stuff over there. And they recently, 2 days ago, asked me to moderate this panel. So I'm really excited to be on here with some new friends and some old friends. And the question that we're trying to answer for you all today is how to get out of Canada. I guess it's like, how do I get out of Canada? And I'm just going to assume that that means like with music. Because otherwise it's pretty easy for some of us. So yeah, I think what we're going to do is actually try to, I imagine there's probably some, like everyone in this room is thinking about leaving Canada, and today I don't blame you, and there's probably some specific questions that you want to ask, so we are going to leave about half an hour for discussion and questions and stuff afterwards. And we're going to try to tackle some kind of more standard ideas and questions before that. How many people here are artists? Oh, shit. Okay. Well, that helps. All the managers and stuff are drinking now. Right. Okay, well, that's great. So we'll try to keep this artist focused. That helps us narrow down our focus a little bit. So we're going to start off with some super short introductions. You all have the program, so you can, if anyone in particular on the panel is really exciting for you, and 30 seconds isn't enough, you can dig through there or come talk to them afterwards, but we're going to keep that part of it short and then dive into some topics that we wanted to talk about today. So to my left is...
Hi, I'm Katja. I'm Katja. I'm from Berlin, Germany. I work for Sound Diplomacy. I'm the head of projects there. And the one side of the business is that we work with cities and governments and write strategies how to implement music in the city development or regional development. And we've just recently wrote a strategy for Vancouver. So I've been there and had a few roundtables, met a couple of you guys. And the other side of the business is that we work with export offices or music offices and support them to bring people to Canada, to Europe, and do country houses like the Canada House at Reeperbahn Festival. We used to do that, or the Great Escape. And we work with a lot of Canadian artists in the past, with a lot of provinces as well, Music BC, and happy to hear later from you guys.
Hi, my name is Naveen Deshpande, and I come from a really beautiful country and a great new market called India. We do a lot of things in music, but I've been warned by our moderator to keep it short and keep it 30 seconds. So I'm just going to do quick one-liners, and then you guys feel free to meet me later and discuss. So I run a company called Mixtape. And we do festivals, some of them we curate, some of them we produce, some of them we do artist management for. We do bookings for over 60 artists and across multiple clientele like clubs, corporate events, college festivals, which is a really big thing in India, music festivals, of course. There's a touring division which does tours with a bunch of artists. Again, genre is not really a barrier for us. We've done stuff with electronic music where we've had artists like Telephone Tel Aviv. We've got Nightmares on Wax playing, Gaslamp Killer, etc. We've had bands like Tina Riven, Dabioza Collective, etc. We also have a lighting and a AV division which does lighting design and AV and stage design for a lot of touring artists, in case if anyone's not able to afford bring in a lighting designer or due to visa issues, we come on board and we help them out with their design and stuff. So yeah, that's my introduction. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dor. I work for Hart Media in London. I'm the promotions manager. We do predominantly national, regional, specialist and student radio promotion. So as well as getting your music out into the world and onto these radio stations and being played. Off the back of that, we also organise promotional tours, interviews and filmed live sessions around live dates in the UK. as well as doing a little bit of online press promotion and more recently Spotify and Apple Music promotion as well. And that's short and sweet, but that's pretty much it.
Great. So my name is Claudia. I'm from Mexico, Guadalajara specifically. We have an international film music festival that it's just for professionals. I mean, it's like a business-to-business meeting. We have like 3 important parts of it. It's the academic, which are conferences, workshops, the business part, which are speed meetings, networking encounters, like private encounters, and the artistic part that are showcases. Our program becomes from open call internationally, specifically for America. Well, that's my interview.
My name is Mark Kesten. I'm an entertainment lawyer from Los Angeles. Formerly an artist manager, radio promoter. Once upon a time lived in Vancouver. And I work with bands, producers, songwriters, some record labels, booking agencies, and various other startup businesses. And I negotiate their deals and sometimes go to court. That's it. And I have my lawyer come when I need to go to court too. So, I work with. I've always, throughout my entire career, worked with a lot of Canadian artists, and continue to do so today. So I'm happy to be here.
Right on. Thank you, everyone. How about a round of applause for our wonderful panel? So I thought it was funny, a little bit funny, that there's kind of a premise behind this whole panel, and that's that, like, how to get out of Canada if you don't have a hit. Because if you have a hit, it kind of takes care of itself. That's, not that I've ever experienced that, but if you have like a world-smashing hit, you're not going to be in this because that kind of does all the work for you. But for those of us who have never had a global hit on the charts, then I guess there's a number of different reasons why you would want to leave, ranging from the weather sucks in Canada in the wintertime, which is totally valid, and actually I think drove most of my tour strategies for the first decade of our touring, to maybe my music doesn't work as well here as it would work in Europe. I think like people in Germany would get it way better than they get it here, to I'm doing really well in Canada and I'm ready to take that next step. And maybe it's just over the border to the States, but maybe it's, maybe it's to Australia, maybe it's to India. And I think the motivation behind, like, it's really important to understand why I want to go to a place. Like I said, I'm in a band called Delhi to Dublin that's done a bunch of traveling internationally over the last 12 or 13 years. And our motivation was like actually to get out of the rain. Like that's the basis that we took our tours. Like if it was to Australia or Bali or Brunei, we'd be like, yep. Regardless of whether that was actually going to become a sustainable growth market for us. But I think there's also, it's possible to be strategic about this. And if you get offered like Woodford Festival over New Year's in Australia, despite the fact that it's a fantastic place to play, if you can never afford or can't afford to go back to Australia like once or twice a year on the regular to build a following there, then does it make sense? Like what is my goal? Is it to build a sustainable business, or is it to go out and party and have fun? And I think both are totally valid, reasons to be out there on the road. So with that said, understanding that there's multiple motivations, I'm going to throw to Dor first. And Dor, can you tell us a little bit about how you, and I guess with specific reference, if there's examples of Canadian artists that you've worked with, but maybe just tell us like what it looks like for you breaking artists in the UK. You gave us some great examples this morning when we were chatting.
Yeah, so we work with a whole myriad of genres. Given the nature of radio, on a station there'll be shows for every different genre. So we work with pretty much everyone from kind of country to rock to electronic to rap, everything. And probably the best example I've got of a Canadian artist we've had is a band called Port Cities from Nova Scotia. And they've done fantastically well. And they were a totally brand new artist with brand new material. And what they did was they came over to us with the new single and just said, we want to see how this goes. And we said, great, the song sounds fantastic. So we pushed it out to the whole country, every single radio contact we had, and the track went down fantastically. It was really, really brilliant. And what this made us able to do was it just got the track out there. They didn't have to come over here, it was no skin off their back, but instantly they started building up a fan base in the UK and building up supporters in radio and tastemakers and that kind of thing. So after a bit of time, we'd done 2 or 3 singles and there were repeat supporters coming over. We were then able to say, you know what, we're able to sponsor a visa. Our company are able to sponsor visas for people to come over. And we now are happy to say, if you did a tour, we know people would support it. We know people would be able to interview you, have live sessions in different areas around the country, as well as then bring people down, do certificate giveaways, and have fans from listening to the songs on the radio over the past year who would want to come down. So we've got a really, really strong position to be in where you don't have to come over if you're not ready, if you don't have a team, if you don't have, you know, thousands of pounds behind you to come over and do this huge campaign. What we can do is have the opportunity to kind of test the waters and put your single out over here and see how it goes and really build up a fan base naturally just through that music. And after a little bit of time, you can see, oh, something's going well here, people are really reacting to this, then more things can be done. You can build up on that, you can have more marketing plans, you can have more structure over the top of it. But a really, really good thing is that you can just really take that. It kind of turns something that is on the other side of the world into something that you can just do really, really easily. And instead of having to, you know, do this huge position to get over to the UK, you can just send your music over and see how it does. And the market for Canadian music and international music as a whole in the UK is enormous. We've got a really strong kind of national music industry in British music, but, you know, there's so much good stuff coming over from everywhere, and everyone's really hungry for that next new thing. And for Canadian music, absolutely, it's such a good scene here. So it's something we're really interested in and something that's happening a lot and is really working.
Cool. And I guess it is possible, along with doing like more traditional radio play, to use like the back end of Spotify to look at where your stuff is resident, or to do it in tandem with.
And it works out completely the same as well. You can't expect to really come over completely with nothing because, you know, it's annoying to say, but everything's so stats driven these days that, you know, if you're putting out something to a big radio station, and, you know, you can't really expect to go to BBC Radio 1 and say, hey, look at my cool new single, and they'll look you up and you've got like 6 Spotify plays or something. You know, it's not going to work. So these things do work hand in hand. Obviously, the more radio play you get, the more, you know, plays and streams and shares you're going to get, but also you need to have a little bit of a good basis beforehand before things can really crack on.
Right. Cool. Naveen, India, exotic, mystical. Is it does it make sense for a Canadian artist to go to India? Like, what are the challenges and the risks and the opportunities that exist?
Well, firstly, India works very differently than what like happens over here or in America or in Europe. We don't have radio. We don't have magazines writing about independent music. We've had only Rolling Stone, but now they've just shut down. So the only way, the biggest source of income for any artist, whether it's an Indian artist or any international artist coming into India, is doing a tour. And if you're lucky, if you put up a good show, if your songs are like good enough for people to like go back and listen to it again and again, you might just become like super lucky. I can give you a few examples. Like, there's a band called Buraka Som Sistema. Nobody knew about this band. They just came and played at a festival, and they just like put up such a great show. And they have a sync deal now with a hair gel company in India, and they've made massive amounts of money. They're getting like offers worth like $200,000 now from India. I'm sure it's more than any other country which has offered them that sort of money. But so you never know. Like, yeah, we've tried it with like not Canadian but like other French artists, where we've obviously used the funding model. We've tried and utilized that money and invested it cleverly. So we utilize that into 2 parts, where we basically got the band 2 times over the course of 3 years. The first one was just an India tour where we did like a couple of festivals and then we had a couple of club gigs. The second tour which we did was, this is something we're trying to develop right now, is take all the artists coming down to India to our neighboring countries, which is the Asian territory. So we took the band to Nepal, they played in Dubai, they played like 7 shows in India. Collectively, they took back a good amount of money, even though we had funding as well for the second tour. After 2 years, which is now the 4th year, we were in a position to, obviously we also had a lot of data which we collected, like the entire tour was shot. It was completely documented. There was pictures. There's everything, like, in terms of social media. We had a lot of data. So we basically recycled that data, got it out, and the third tour, we were literally in a position to ask the festival to pay for everything, which is including their flights, including their fees. Everything was covered. So it completely depends on your music. It's definitely an industry you can crack. You can really be successful in India. You can keep going back again and again. There is definitely scope. There's also scope to do like cheap merchandise. It's very cheap to produce merchandise in India. So if you build a fan base, there is potential to literally make merchandise in India and sell it during the same tour when you're traveling. Yeah.
Do you want to say a little bit about what you have organized for the Canadian acts that you're helping to tour in December this year?
So we've got 2 Canadian acts playing at 2 festivals. One is called the NH7 Weekender, which is more like an indie festival which has like multi-genres of music. The target
I think you got to like spell it out a bit more. So people may have in their head right now, like India, maybe you're like playing next to a camel or something, but NH7 is fucking mind blowing.
Yeah.
Like it's like going to Coachella basically, except you're in India. You're in Pune, just outside of Bombay. So I think it's important to say that like festival culture in many of these, not only India but also in China and many of the Asian countries, is just like exploded.
Yeah.
And these festivals are not like they're like fully real, huge, world-class festivals.
Yeah, so we've had a tremendous growth in terms of festivals. In 2008, if I'm right, we had just like 2 festivals, and now we have about 85 festivals. And these range from like a 2,000 capacity going up to 15,000, which is what NH7 is. And everyone have had their own model of building their own festivals. NH7 in this case have had a very organic model of building the festival, because it was probably one of the early ones, and the entire artist community actually helped build the festival for them. So that's how it worked out. And I can name a few other festivals. There's a really cool underground electronic festival called Magnetic Fields, which happens in the north of India. Again, very small, 2,500 capacity, but like super, super underground names like Fortet, Daphne, and all those sort of guys. And there's the Goa Sunsplash. So there's tons of them. I can have a conversation later, and I can tell you what is there in India right now. But with the Canadian acts, we're testing out waters this time. This is the first time even we've got involved. So we've got IMUR and Louise Burns, a singer-songwriter from Vancouver, who's playing this year. So they're playing the NH7 festival, and they're gonna be doing like few club shows, few auditorium shows, and then they're gonna end at Magnetic Field. So it's a test run for us. I'm not sure if it's gonna work or not. I'm gonna let the bands do their best, and we're gonna try our best in terms of putting out all sort of help from our side. We're gonna go wild in terms of the guerrilla marketing campaigns which we have, all sort of promotions. As I said, we don't really have a big support from the industry per se, like the radio or the magazines and stuff. So we do everything DIY. Yeah, we literally have gone back to the old school techniques of promoting shows, flyering, stickering. There's a big list of those sort of things.
Moving on to Europe, Katja, can you talk to us a little bit about what the appetite for Canadian music is in whatever that is, whatever Canadian music is in Europe, and what's happening over there?
we heard a little bit about the UK. Germany, it's where I'm from. It's the biggest market actually in Europe. It's in terms of numbers bigger than the UK, and it's a very, let's say, it's an easier market to enter than the UK. Also, France is quite difficult, so Germany is a good way of entering Europe. It's also a quite healthy market. Means people still buy records, even though the numbers are changing rapidly as well. That obviously streaming is getting more and more important. But in terms of touring, it's a bit easier than the UK. You get paid better, you have better accommodation stuff, you just get treated better as an artist in Germany. But obviously it's the same as Dor was saying. To enter the market, you need some sort of support in the country or interest that you're coming over. And I guess that's exactly the same as you were saying, try it first with promotion before you come. What we've been doing a lot with Canadian artists, and we work a lot with the provinces, so there are those chances that you can come over for showcase festivals like Reeperbahn Festival you probably heard of, or the Great Escape, which is a great way to enter the market and also like to showcase in front of the industry. And what I just want to echo as well, it's just important that there is some following, obviously, but also there's a lot that you can do on your own on the DIY side, like booking your tours is not that difficult, like finding some venues that would do shows. There are lots of student cities in Germany, so student radios are out there, student communities, community centers, where just small artists book their shows themselves. And it's still like a really good scene for that. So if there's no one like you, if you can't find a booking agent right away, there's still the chance that you can book your tour yourself. And it's just also the neighboring countries, then Austria, Switzerland, very, very good markets to tour and make money in, especially Switzerland. The fees are really, really good there, and festivals are all over the place as well. I just want to like kind of echo what you were saying. It's just important to build your fan base and look at the stats and see where you want to focus on before you go somewhere. So. And we talked about this before, don't only look at the markets that seem obvious and that you really, really want to go to, like the UK is the market, or the US where people really want to go to, but it doesn't mean that it's the best market to enter. There's, a huge market in South America. We will hear more about that, in Asia, and I think it's important that it's an international business right now and that you don't have to focus on the trend markets only.
Cool. It seems like the U.S. just came up naturally in conversation, Mark. When we were in our little preamble this morning, Mark was expressing that like back in the day, it used to be that everybody just naturally wanted to go to the States, and maybe that's changing. So we'll leave it with you.
Yeah, I think that actually what was just mentioned is really applicable to the United States, which is you don't always want to focus on the obvious markets. And obviously now with the access to a lot more statistics and data that you have at your hands, you can really, look at your assets, especially online, and try to figure out where you're gaining traction and where you have an audience. But in terms of the States, what I was saying was that I remember going to conferences like Canadian Music Week back in the early 2000s, and that was the topic for a lot of the audience at those panels, right? It was, how do we break into the United States? And this was before, the Drakes and the Weekends and the Arcade Fires and all that kind of stuff. And Canada's always had a healthy, amount of successful acts in the U.S., whether it be, Rush, to Neil Young, to, moving forward to this new wave that's really broken down those doors. But there was a time there where it was is the Canadian music being looked at differently than, if by the United States? And I don't know if that's still the case. I think that there's been a lot of barriers that have been broken down internationally just because of the way music is consumed now. But one thing that really I think is true about the United States is the fact that you want to, if you're trying to break into the United States and your thought is, I want to get a show in Los Angeles or New York, if I can just get to School Night or Hotel Cafe, or, I'm mentioning the LA ones because that's what I'm familiar with, or, like Low End Theory, which doesn't exist anymore. If you're a hip hop artist, that's really going to be, if I can make it there, then something's actually going to happen. I don't think that that's really a smart strategy anymore. My own personal opinion is that Los Angeles doesn't really have a music scene right now. It's more people coming in and they're industry people. Yeah, you're going to get seen by some people who may be able to help you out. But one of the first questions that you may get asked is, well, how are you doing in other markets? Because those are the markets where the consumers and the music fans are really at. And I think that it's really important that you focus on those markets, and especially here with the panel that was on before us, a very accessible and fan music friendly, community oriented market of that whole Pacific Northwest passage is, depending on the genre of music that you have, if you can build a fan base in a region like that or somewhere else in the United States, then you can come into a market like LA and New York and actually be able to showcase, play your show, get in front of people, but be able to come there already with a fan base built that's actually just fans, music consumers, people who are going to, pay attention and be interested in what you're doing as an artist throughout your career. And I think that that's very important to do. So, I think that building a regional fan base, whether that be through doing your online assets or actual touring, is really important. And there's, nothing better than being able to come to Los Angeles or New York and play a show, but be able to say after you're done that show to somebody who says, I've never seen you before, what's going on? Well, I can sell X amount of tickets coming down here. And because that is very impressive. That's just as impressive as being able to walk into a room with big streaming stats. So I think that that's a really important thing to think about when you're looking at the United States. And I'd also say that you want to tackle this. You can tackle the states if you're in Canada in regions. You probably don't want to say, just like touring Canada, you don't want to say, well, I'm going to tour from Vancouver to Montreal to Halifax and then just hitchhike home. I don't know what I'm going to do on the way back, right? You can do it where you're going to target a certain regional market and really figure out whether that works for you. And if it's working for you, continue to build that market. And then, I think that it's important to think about the genre of music that you're making and whether the U.S. is really a good or worthwhile market for that. I mean, if you're making hip hop, fantastic. It's probably a good market that you want to focus on right now anyways. If you're, in an extreme death metal group, you're probably better off focusing your attention on Europe, or other markets other than the United States, because you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck. And there's a lot there, so you can really see where the genres work and where they don't work, and then focus your attention on the markets, whether that be the United States or elsewhere, that really work for the type of music that you're making. That'd be my advice on getting out of Canada.
I'd like to add something. What I've seen, like artists doing, they're moving to Berlin and staying there for a while, especially electronic music artists. And that's working super well. I mean, if you come over for 3 months and build your fan base there, it's not that expensive to live there and survive there. And it's really worth it because you can travel all over Europe as well. And yeah, especially for electronic music, I can highly recommend that to do that instead of trying it from here. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Katja. We have one more panelist, and then we're going to throw to you guys for some questions. Claudia runs an amazing organization and festival called FIMPRO in Mexico, in Guadalajara. And can you tell us a little bit more about like what you're looking for from Canadian talent and how that might?
Yes, I think the difference of us with all these festivals that everybody's talking is that it is closed for professionals. I mean, it's not open for public audience. There are only showcases of 25 minutes. So we have like blocks. This last edition, we have 6 bands from Canada in 2 blocks, 3 in each one. And I forgot to mention those. I only told you that they were 3, so they were 6 bands. And it's only for professionals. And as Mark was saying, like the tip that I give them, it's like to analyze who's gonna be there, who are the professionals that are gonna see you, and in the speed meetings to present or only go or make a meeting with the ones that you know that your type of music is working on their job, you know? Don't do like all the meetings that you can. I mean, just analyze information, who's gonna be there, who do you wanna talk, prepare, give you information to them, and not only say, I wanna go to India or I wanna go to Berlin. You have to know why you wanna do that. If your music is trending there, so it's a good possibility that you're gonna have something from there. I saw yesterday the manager of one of the groups that were in Canada, and she told me that she hasn't closed a deal, but she's negotiating for come back to Mexico. So that's like the idea, to promote your group, take advantage of, make the most of it, you know, make network, make connections. That's the principal idea of FIMPRO, to teach them and make connections. Maybe it's not something that will happen at the moment, but you can work on that, and it will happen maybe in a year or 2 years once the program or the booking it's open for another festival.
I think there's obviously clearly a bunch of ways to get out of Canada, and ranging from the super strategic to the just kind of like, I want to go to Berlin, which could also be strategic, but I want to go to Berlin and spend 3 months and just do anything that I can, to working with a touring agency on the ground, and you know, trying to build an audience that you can come back to. Working with radio and Spotify playlisters and trackers to try to build up a following before you even leave, which is awesome because I think it's like pretty cost effective. Showcasing, I think, has worked really well for my own band personally, in terms of making connections to promoters and stuff. And how should we summarize what you said, Mark? Do hip hop in the States.
Yeah, that's right. You know, how do you break into the States? Get some face tattoos and and dye your hair. That's I don't know. No, I mean, I think the key is that there's so much information that you have access to now, where it used to be, you know, you take out the map and you figure out where you can get booked, and it was really, if you're going to go on the road, you take a list and say, okay, these cities work, these cities we're going to retire because there's no reason to go back. We've been there 5 times. You can still do that, and I think that in a lot of genres in the United States, that's actually the best thing that you can possibly do. What I tell bands all the time is your best connection if you're a young band and you're starting out, your best ally are other bands, other bands that are successful or popular in the genre that you're in, because when it comes down to it, I mean, in my experience, that's who people listen to. You know, if an agent or a manager or somebody at a record label gets a phone call from one of the artists that they've signed that's actually been a success story and says, you should check out this other band, that goes a long way. And also, you know, you make friends and you make that network within your own world, and then other musicians and other artists get to know you, and that can turn into opportunities. So I definitely think that that's still worthwhile to do in the U.S. I don't know that it's really that practical anymore to say, try to move to New York for a couple months. It's completely unrealistically, you know, expensive to live in New York or to live in Los Angeles. It's becoming a big problem with the artist communities in both those cities because they're getting driven out of those cities because you can no longer go there and do what you used to be able to do, which is live in, you know, a crappy neighborhood and just make your art and, you know, live in an artistic community. And now with the way that those cities are becoming more and more expensive, it's less and less possible to do that. So, but I do agree that if there is a scene that you're really into, that going there, if you can, and spending some time there and meeting the people there, and that's a great way to develop a fan base, you know, or just a network of other artists, because that in turn, like I said, that's some of the best word of mouth that you can get, is having another artist who you look up to or who you respect send out a message to their fan base about what you're doing, and that can gain a lot of traction.
Questions? Yeah. Is there somebody with a? Oh, okay, there is. Yay.
Hello?
And if there is somebody in specific that you want to ask a question to, just say their name or point at them.
I was just curious if you guys knew about or had experience with house concerts for touring Europe, India, Mexico.
That's
and,
pretty
and
big in India.
Non-conventional types of gigs.
It's pretty big in India as well right now. There's a singer-songwriter called Pratik Kuhad. He's been so basically we don't have like the label culture, but like Apple Music, and there's a streaming platform called Savan. He's like really backing artists. So they have really backed Pratik Kuhad, who's the singer-songwriter from India, and they've done a tour with like 18 shows, if I'm not wrong, which is only house concerts. And there's like a lot of data being driven from these house concerts. It's been shot. They are on Instagram. There's also YouTube stuff which they're driving. So yeah, it's pretty big in India right now as well. Yeah.
Also, just to jump in on this, the house music scene in the UK is absolutely enormous. I'm not so sure about touring itself, but there's the amount of clubs and nights and house nights that go on in London alone is absolutely crazy.
I meant like
House.
Sure.
Like where the house is, or someone's house is the venue.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, there's plenty of houses as well. So, you know, walk down any street.
Are artists successfully touring those places doing house concerts?
My answer's going to be less specific on this one, but yeah, for sure. So a really good example of a British band that started exactly like that is Foals. Started solely playing in people's living rooms. And it's a little bit harder to do now, specifically getting success commercially, because a lot of stuff is so stats focused and that kind of thing. But if you can get in a city in the UK like Manchester, I don't know if other cities are around, but there's really like, it's got a lot of subcultures, a lot of good nightlife. If you can build up a name doing that, where there's a lot of parties, there's a lot of raves, there's a lot of things going on all over the place, if you can build up a name for yourself like that, then definitely it's something that can grow, and as long as you're building up a reputation, that's something that can be really effective and a great marketing tool.
It's not that big in Germany. It used to be, but it's kind of over that trend. Like it was like a while, but I think it's easy to, because everything is more or less, it's easy to put on shows. So there's not that need for it. Yeah.
What about sofa concerts?
It's still happening. Yeah. But it's
Just
not
one
as
thing-
big anymore.
Sorry, just one thing about the house concerts in India. These are driven by the fans and not any promoters. So like fans are calling in the artists and they are calling the other cities. So it's basically they are acting like promoters. So that's what is happening right now.
And I think that speaks to also the venue issue that you're currently facing. So there's a connection between the importance of house concerts and the presence of venues to play in. Yeah. Is there any other questions?
I've done 2 small promotional campaigns that were run by like a nationally based or a Canadian-based organization doing press, and it was really cool because like we got all the sort of interest across different nations, and but it can be really hard to like trust that. Obviously, like anyone who's done a release, you'll get like a bunch of spammy sort of send us 400 euros and we'll put your song on BBC or whatever. And we were actually thinking of going with one, but since it was past the release, we're like, oh, is it even worth it? Because everything seems to be so focused on the release date. And is there any, do you have any sort of advice for, who you can really trust, especially in like a pocket like Victoria? It seems really, really hard to even think outside of, say, Vancouver, Seattle, like Pacific Northwest. So, I mean, I want to throw some money into an international campaign, but.
So I think if people are coming to you and just saying, give us your money and we'll do this, that's probably an immediate thing to say no to. But if you're just shopping around for that kind of thing, there are plenty of amazing independent companies. And my advice to you when looking around is any decent promo company should make a good proposal for you. And we'll do that for free. So even before you've gone out and spent anything, if you can approach one that's been recommended by someone or someone who works for an artist you admire, is asking them to build a proposal and send them the music first. And if they like it, then they'll put together something with a full plan around a release and any promotion proposal they can do. And you can then look at that and compare it to something else. And it's a really good way to do it if you're just looking at it from a completely outside market, and you can shop around that way and get a much more detailed look about what's available for you.
Sure, yeah. There did seem to be a few that were pretty legitimate looking, and they did give us like a couple quotes and all that. But obviously it's pretty hard to.
Can I just add? This happens a lot from India, by the way. I'm going to be honest. So we have this whole culture of college festivals, which is basically university festivals. So in a year, they have like 3 days allotted for their celebration. So one of the nights in these 3 days is international music. So sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, sometimes these kids misuse the whole funding culture, the funding idea. So they literally hit everyone where they see, these guys have like 25,000 followers, and they'll just write random emails. So I would say, to be honest, it's best if you get something like that, it's best to connect with the local promoter from there and just like sort of have a conversation and find out if it's well worth investing your time and money into going to that university. But otherwise, music festivals and like promoters, you can straight away do like a background check through their website and stuff like that. But yeah, with college festivals, it's a little tricky there.
Claudia, can you speak to how important it might be to do like radio tracking and stuff in Mexico before you go down?
Like what, sorry?
Radio tracking or like radio promotion campaigns?
Yes, we have, I'm the showcase coordinator there from FIMPRO. He has a radio show. So what we do is before the event, he starts like playing all the program that we're gonna have. He shares like the music with their co-workers, and we try to make like a playlist, share the playlist, and you as group that are gonna be there, you share your own playlist. I'm gonna be here, like communicate with your social networks, with your fans, so you can start growing there at where you are going. I mean, in FIMPRO you won't be in touch with the public, but it's a good way to start in Mexico, to get to know and analyze, as I said, where are you trending, if it's Mexico, if it's India, if it's Berlin, put your effort in those places.
Question? What? Oui. Oh, oops.
Hi, my name is Sade. I'm from Montreal. I live in Vancouver. I have a question, so it's like, I had to write it down because I'm not good at asking questions, but someone like myself who's from Canada who gets mistaken for an American artist because of like my swag and stuff, would it be smarter to try to break into the States first versus the UK? Because like my ultimate goal is to be a worldwide entertainer, and the States would seem smarter just because like budget-wise, the currency's like more even to Canada versus the UK. Like, just want your input on what you think.
I would say, put yourself out there in both of those markets and just see which one, if any of them, you're starting to gain traction. I would try to, do some promotional campaigns, get your music out there, work the social media channels, and then, think about whether you want to invest in trying to go and play at some of the festivals. The U.S. is a tough market, I feel like, for developing festivals because South by Southwest isn't what it used to be. But I think that there's a lot, and you could probably speak more to the ones in the UK, but I know we were discussing last night, there's things like the Great Escape and other festivals like that over there that are really being used as discovery grounds for new artists. The US, it's a lot about, I don't think that there's a big barrier anymore between whether you're Canadian or you're American. I think it really comes down to whether you're making a style of music and a song that's connecting at that moment with what the consumers are looking for. And really that's what's driving the business in the United States. Record labels are just looking at, artist development is now done by the market. That's it. It's, you're going to be very lucky if you play your music for somebody and they say that this is a great song that has no statistics behind it, so I'm going to take a chance on it. They're going to say, that's not such a great song, but look, it's got 30 million spins, so I think that the market's spoken, and and we can hedge our bets that way. But I would say go for both, and don't limit yourself. And if you see one market start to move, then I would focus some more attention on it.
Thank you.
There's a question in the back, and then there's a question up front afterwards.
Yeah, so my question was just, it's a good opportunity to get kind of across the board. I've done a bunch of like DIY tours actually starting in Switzerland and Germany and stuff. I'm just wondering, I haven't been there for a few years, I live in the States, so like just across the board, how often do you think that you need to tour to, as an international artist where people understand you can't just pop over every few months, how often do you think you need to follow up with a regional, like building a regional fan base so that you don't lose the momentum that you had before? Would love to hear just like briefly from every country. If you guys can.
So, I mean, if you've done a regional tour in an outside country and it's gone well, then yeah, I think it's fairly important to follow it up, especially if you've got a certain amount of success on it. The band I mentioned in my introduction, they did 4 singles in a year, which I thought was a pretty good way to do it, and that finished with a tour. So that's a really good time frame to kind of introduce yourself, follow that up, cement it, and then build up a core fan base that can involve you in a tour. I think if you've got good success in one place, I don't know how quickly, I don't know what anyone else thinks, how quickly you'd want to immediately kind of jump onto somewhere else. Otherwise you're getting into a kind of chicken egg situation of having to be constantly touring just to sustain that fan base. But I think if you're looking at one place in particular, then it is important to follow it up, because especially if you're not from there, if you've started to build up a tiny bit of support, then you don't want to let that go, because people are so fickle about music these days, with so much being thrown at you constantly through Spotify playlists and Discover Weeklies and pretty faceless music that comes at you where you don't even look at who the artist is. If you've managed to build a connection, you've already beaten that, so you're going to want to hold on to that pretty tight, I think.
Or how often? Like every year, let's say like once, twice?
To tour?
Yeah.
I think if you can get one good tour in a year, I think that's definitely good enough. Not everyone is lucky enough to come over kind of 2 or 3 times a year, but if you can get a really decent nationwide tour done once a year, I think that's definitely good enough to really start to build up a good core fan base.
One thing that I think that Dor mentioned that I think is very important is that you have to, if you're going to tour, you want to tour for a reason. like behind something. And these days, it's so easy to put product into the market and get it internationally, and you can control that a lot better than you could back before the internet and social media had really taken off. So I think it's really important to maybe not necessarily follow up by physically going there, but by pumping quality content that's backed by strategic marketing and promotion into those markets so that you're staying relevant and keeping that fan base. And then, of course, following that up with touring. Or if you're lucky enough to get offered a great tour, you take that and make sure that you're surrounding it with content.
Question from up in the front?
Yeah, Kuba Ohms from Victoria here, live in Vancouver. We released a couple singles off the last album in Canada, Do It Yourself, with an indie radio promoter, and we did pretty well. We went top 20 with both on pop radio, and the last single just hit this week, 4 million spins on Spotify, another 3 on YouTube, literally out of our living room sort of thing. And we found that it happened so fast. It was all happening so fast, and we were getting calls from majors in the US, and everybody was excited, and Canadian music's so hot right now, and all this sort of thing. And then it kind of simmered down, and I'm talking, it all happens within a matter of a couple months, 2 or 3 months. It's like quite a blast. And we weren't able to parlay that momentum into the UK, which we feel this would have been pretty strong, or Germany for that matter, let alone the US. But I mean, the UK and Germany have always been, like on Spotify actually, strangely our top hits are from Berlin. So 2 questions. One, it's too late, I guess, to release that single or to go back into back catalog. I mean, we've really worked hard. We have great grant systems here, and we were able to tap into that and produce some pretty high quality productions that are ready to go on radio anywhere. Could we release something that's already been released again? I'm thinking no, but I don't know, I'm wondering. And 2, we're prepping the new release, and we're probably just going to release a single. And I mean, we'd love to release in the UK and try it without going there and touring first and doing what you were saying happened with that band from Nova Scotia. What kind of numbers were they doing when you said it did really well?
What do you mean? What kind of numbers?
Well, when you said it did really well at radio, was it a small hit? Were they able to follow it up with a tour?
Yeah, so it did really well on radio. We pushed them because they were pretty brand new when we went. We decided we wouldn't take it to national radio, so BBC Radio 1, 2, that kind of stuff, because they're very focused on the chart and very focused on stats and established artists. But we can do a specialist and regional tour where these stations are much more focused on the music and less about kind of the name behind it. So if you are coming, and especially if you've got a lot of success and something to talk about over here, just because you haven't really had a campaign over here, that shouldn't matter. You can definitely do a regional radio campaign and get out to some stations which have just as bigger audiences as the national stations, but will be much more likely to take a good look at you. So the band Port Cities that we worked must have got on kind of 60 or 70 radio playlists, which is absolutely fantastic. Yeah. And that's just off their first single. And then really regional radio, especially if you're starting afresh, is a huge growing curve. So with each single that they came out, and this kind of goes for your question as well, and just building upon what you have and building up more and more means we can get more support each time and then build up a name for yourself. And if like you've got the streaming stats, you've got a lot to talk about already, then that's only going to work in your favor, and it's definitely something that will help you come on in leaps and bounds over in the UK. And I'm sure in Germany as well.
Yeah, I guess it's the same. I'm not a specialist in that, I have to say.
Not in radio. So I'll stay on with you then, because you're a specialist in radio. Could you release a single that's already, that is, like, I mean, the single is now, we're looking at, the release date was 3 years ago here.
Yeah, so absolutely, we do that quite a lot. And because in radio now, you can't really work on release dates because everything's available online. Radios don't want something that's like, oh, it was released 2 weeks ago. so we work with something called Impact Date, which is a kind of fictional date we made up. And basically we can work that with you. And when we were planning a campaign, we'd say, okay, we're going to service the single out of all of our stations on this date. And then about 6 to 8 weeks later, we'll have our impact date. And what that is it's just our date that we've made up that we're kind of hoping will have got all of our attention, all of our support, everything would have built up to that one date, and that's where it's going to be really as big as it's going to get. So release date, in fact, doesn't really matter. As long as you put an impact date on it, then that's all that's going to be a thing, really. Especially if you'd done a campaign in the UK a year ago, you wouldn't want to release the same thing again. But if it was 3 years ago and you didn't get on radio in the UK, then there's absolutely no reason why you shouldn't.
Wow. Thanks.
Yeah, another question in the middle there.
Check. Okay. Hi. You guys have mentioned that there's these pockets where certain genres are succeeding. What would you say is the pocket for R&B and soul music right now in Canada and also internationally?
You mean what cities in Canada?
Yeah.
Right.
Like what's a hub?
Right,
what would be a hub?
And internationally. Why don't we go down the line super quick and comment on that? Whether R&B and soul is working in your territory.
Yeah, I haven't really talked about genres at all. In Germany, it's people really like Canadian music, so everything that sounds Canadian is what they like.
What does that mean?
It's like folky singer-songwriter, lots of people on stage playing different instruments. That's what people think.
Because that's what The Weeknd does.
And so when we do Canada House, for example, those bands are the ones that draw most of the attention, even though they're not well known or anything, because that's the perception of Canadian music in Germany somehow. And R&B and soul is not that big in Germany, so it is a bit difficult. If you have a hit, of course, it's going to be a hit in Germany as well, but it's, I guess, not the first market to enter with that kind of music.
Actually, I cannot answer this question because in India, everything works on like discovery. Like there's no particular genre of music which you can say is big. Internet has been our biggest tool. Like even if it's a band like in some corner of the world and if they've put out some really good record and stuff, it comes to all the Indians, right? Like everyone knows about that band. So I really can't say if R&B is big in India as such, but there's a big following of Hiatus Coyote. I don't know if it's this band from Australia. There's a massive following, and they're actually coming down this year to play in India. That's their first tour, which is happening. So everyone's like really looking forward. When the announcement came out, I saw like at least probably like 10,000 shares of people being excited about this band coming down to India. So yeah, it's pretty open actually. I can't like answer that question. What's big in terms of genre of music? Yeah.
I personally think R&B and soul is super hot right now. I think it's a really, really popular genre. It's kind of had the whole like Tom Misch effect, especially as someone who's really ridden this wave and is a good example of how successful it can be if you do it in your own kind of special way. And I just think, it's something that I'm not sure about other places in the world or in Europe, but in the UK it's something that's really good, strong vocalists, a kind of real soulful groove. If you can get it right and have a really nice touch, some great production, it's something that I think is really popular right now.
Well, in Mexico, there's also not like a big or huge community for that. As they say, if it's a hit, it will be all over Mexico, but there's no like a big part of that.
The U.S. is always loves R&B and soul. Although I do think that one thing that's coming back and is that is strong right now more than ever is having a great live performance, and a lot of the newer R&B and soul groups that are having some good success are coming with really strong bands. that are supporting them as well. Whether it's if you're a solo artist, that is. If you're a whole band, then you don't need to worry about it. But that's something that's coming back around where you're seeing actual instruments on stage, and I think that just we're starting to see that come back a lot, and maybe that's just a reaction to the gigantic success of massive market for EDM, where now you're starting to see people really focusing back on instruments and that coming back in. But I think that there's a couple R&B and soul groups that I've worked with recently that have strong live performances, and that combined with good songs is of course the United States has always been a great market for that, and obviously the major centers. I don't know if your Omaha show is going to be great, but I can certainly tell you that the Chicagos, Detroits, Los Angeles, and the whole South is going to, those are great markets for that.
I think we have to finish, right? One more question. There's a question in the back there.
Thank you. I guess one thing that my band has had a bit of a trouble with is we play like louder guitar-based music, which definitely in Canada does not seem to be something that the radio wants to play. I was just wondering if it might be worth looking at doing that sort of campaign in, say, Germany or the UK, or whether it's better to focus more on kind of more DIY markets, or doing something like going on tour to build a fan base rather than putting money into like a more traditional radio tracking sort of situation. So I was just curious for especially Germany, UK, and the States.
Yeah. Germany's definitely a good market for that. It's just not that much about radio. It's more touring and festivals. People really like that kind of music. It's in general a quite conservative market in terms of taste. It takes a while till people take on new stuff. So rock music and more guitar music is huge still in Germany. Yeah.
And on the UK side of things, I think it's kind of pretty similar. We have some great specialist shows and specialist radio stations which would be super keen to jump on board with slightly heavier guitar music, but if you were going to use that as your kind of first step into that market, it might not get you quite as much traction as you'd hope, because it is, as the name suggests, it is specialist, and it is not going to be quite as wide. But if you're using radio to follow on from some decent support slots on a live tour or something like that, then it definitely is the market out there for it. But it's something to look at maybe as a second step into that market.
A U.S. rock radio campaign is a massive financial undertaking. So, if you can do it, then, you may want to think about doing that. Although I'd say that U.S. rock radio right now, I'm by no means a specialist at it, but it's really having trouble figuring out whether they actually want rock on rock radio stations. So I think that it's smart to tour, and definitely, if something's working, then you can think about starting out regionally or with the specialty shows and all that stuff. But if you look at the rock charts, I mean, there's not a lot of rock on there. So, yeah.
Thank you all so much. Let's give it up one more time for the panelists. Thank you. I believe there's a lot more to come, too, over the next day or so. So we'll see you all around and have fun at the festival. Thanks.
Let's give a round of applause to Tarun. Thank you so much for moderating.